Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jessica Driscoll, and I'm Head of Immersive Technology at Digital Catapult. And we're here today to talk about the Immersive Arcade project that Digital Catapult has been working on with Audience of the Future. So firstly, I'd like to introduce my fellow panelists, and then I'm going to frame a little bit about what we're going to be talking about, and then we're going to have some discussion and some debate and some audience polls and some interaction to talk about the project and how you can get involved. So firstly, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Tonya, could you please introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about what you've been working on regarding immersive recently?
Yeah, so my name is Tanya Nilsson. I'm currently London Area Director for Arts Council England, so the main funder of subsidized arts within England. But prior to this, I was Director of Arts, Technology and Innovation, and I was really pleased to be able to work with Digital Catapult on a program called Creative XR, which is all about promoting the use of immersive within the cultural sector. And so what we're really trying to do as arts councils is get more people interested in immersive, figuring out how it can, tell new stories, but also reach new audiences. So really pleased to be part of this session because it's really important, I think, that we start to get people, as many people as possible, engaged with immersive.
Thank you so much. And Matt, could you please introduce yourself?
Good morning. So my name is Matt Sanson. I am Head of Delivery for the Audience of the Future Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. That's a £33 million fund, which is supporting a number of projects, and you will have heard from a number of our demonstrator projects over the last few days, but really it's about innovation and development within creative industries with immersive technologies, and it's about the commercialization of creative content using immersive tech.
Brilliant, thanks very much. And last but not least, Aki.
Hi everyone, my name is Aki Järvinen and I work in Jessica's team at Digital Catapult as a researcher. I have some 20 years of experience from interactive media, and today at 2:15 at the session spaces I will be sharing some of the insights that we've produced to the second piece of research in the Audience of the Future program having to do with the creative immersive landscape, so be there.
Excellent, good. I was going to plug you later, but you've already done it for yourself. That's good. Okay, so what we are seeking to do with the Immersive Arcade project, and the first part of which is the timeline, which we'll be talking about today, is to really platform the last 20 years of immersive content coming out of the UK. So by immersive, we are talking about a rather broad church, from things like dark fields immersive audio, to virtual reality shown in museums and galleries, to branded content, to augmented reality, all the way through to things like Punch Drunk and You Me Bum Bum Train. We want to cast the net wide and find out what are those standout pieces of immersive content and why should they be platformed on the immersive timeline in the Immersive Arcade project. I think that when we've been researching this project, we've realised that there are no great definitive lists of standout British immersive content, and also the experience that people have had is very fragmented. So those of you familiar with Benedict Anderson's work on imagined communities, that in that far off time where people all read the same newspapers and watched the same TV shows and had that kind of collective imagined community experience, that's very, very different in immersive technology, I think, because some of us have seen experiences at galleries or at festivals, and very small numbers of people have seen these experiences. That doesn't mean to say that they aren't seminal and they aren't important though. So that's why we decided to do this project, to really shine a light on those things. So I think that I want to show you a few clips now and a few stills about the diversity of the industry and the content that's come out of the UK. So I'd like to start with showing a quick picture of Darkfield. So for those of you not familiar with Darkfield immersive audio experiences, they have done amazing installations in shipping containers, and I experienced all three of them at King's Cross just before the lockdown, which was really, really brilliant. So you're completely in the dark and you've got headphones on and you have the most amazing immersive binaural experience. And lately they've pivoted their offering to an at-home offering, so you can experience Darkfield radio at home with two devices, which has been really, really great during the lockdown. I'm not sure if we've got the still of Darkfield here. Maybe we can get that up on the screen. Oh, it's up on the screen. Okay, great. Sorry, I can't see what's going up on the screen. So, okay, I know for next time now. Great. So there are also pure narrative experiences like Punch Drunk, Sleep No More, which many of you probably experienced. And then we could also talk about hybrid experiences like Can You See Me Now by Blast Theory. This was a really, really interesting experience which involved people running around, tracking data, etc. So again, what does immersive mean? And last but not least is branded content. I think that sometimes people forget that brands have done a really good job in exposing people to immersive technologies through trade shows, in shopping centres, and really kind of bringing something new to the brand experience. So we're also including that on our immersive timeline as well. One of my favourite experiences has been Marshmallow Laser Feast's Ocean of Air. I thought this was a really game-changing experience with its use of haptics, and it was a really beautiful experience to do with another person. I was lucky enough to experience it twice. And now I'd like to move on to the panel and ask them, what has been your standout experience over the last 20 years and why? It's a very, very big question, and I know I'm asking you to pick one, but can I start with you, Aki?
Sure. Yeah, I will include one that is on our timeline as well, and actually was also shown at the Saatchi Gallery. That is Fly. So that was commissioned by British Airways and made by Charlotte Mickelborg and the team. And I think the reason that I chose that was that I think it taps in a wonderful way to this very ancient desire of people, us, flying and imagining what it would actually to have wings, and also provides a history lesson to the history of flight. And it's one of those, obviously, that if we want to reproduce it for home audiences, there is the challenge that really what stood out in that experience was the installation that they had built at the gallery, which sort of tilted you into this flying position, and you felt almost like a bird, or you felt like taking off with the Wright brothers in their first airplane. So, but yeah, that's my choice.
Okay, that's a really good choice. I just wanted to pick up on something that you said. Do you think that VR needs installations? Do you think it needs to be in a situation, or do you think you can have just a good experience at home?
Well, yes, you can. I mean, it's definitely based on what the creative goals of the experience are. I mean, there is this thing with VR that even if, however immersive a headset experience might be, I think, at least personally, I'm always kind of aware that I have something on my face. And so there's this concept called conceptual blending, where you're kind of like aware of two different spaces at the same time. And I think that's really applies in VR. But it's interesting that you mentioned Darkfield before, because I just experienced on Tuesday their latest radio one at home, in my own home, and the fact that it plays with that binaural audio, and if you give it the chance, you close your eyes and do what they asked you to do in terms of, in this version, lying down, it's then you don't have that feeling of having something in your face, and we all have that experience of hearing some weird noises on our houses, and it sort of really plays on that both fear and fascination, and I feel that that's a great opportunity, an example where, as you could almost say like a lo-fi technology actually achieves in terms of immersion, something that the more higher end stuff quite doesn't, at least as of yet, because of the hardware.
I really like that, fear and fascination. I'm going to copy that, the two Fs. Matt, how about you? What's been your standout piece over the last 20 years?
That's a good question. I think there's a few, actually. I think so. I'm going to answer that with a few different pieces if I can. I think from a sort of immersive experience, without necessarily the kind of headset piece, I think Sleep No More was amazing. I was lucky enough to see that in Shanghai, and it was absolutely an experience. And I think I was the last person from our group to kind of leave the event, and I was there for the full, whatever it was, 2 hours. I think that was an amazing piece of kind of immersive experience. And actually, I think it was really interesting in terms of how they were managing the audience. So you were wandering around, and there was sometimes, I think the sort of beginning, I think I ended up sort of missing some of the triggers, but you could make your own path through the building. but actually the way that they managed the flow of the audience, so kind of everybody naturally ended up coming back down into the final room for the final piece, was great. And you could, I mean, also what it was good for, I think, as well, was apart from watching the performers and watching the experience, you could watch the audience as well, which was really interesting. Watching how kind of people were reacting to that was great. I think in terms of more of a digital experience, I think Notes on Blindness is really good. And again, as a sort of experiential, but also the sort of thing that, you know, you sit there and makes you think. Really interesting piece. I think in terms of other stuff over the last 20 years, I'm going to put a plug in for Beatsaber, just as a kind of, as a gaming experience that uses VR. I mean, I've tried many of these things, as I'm sure everybody has, and I've seen ones where you get bounced around and you're moving around, and it is sometimes it's a very problematic experience. And then there was one where sort of I won't name it, but you know, you're meant to be piloting giant robots, and actually just jumping around in this arena makes you feel very ill very quickly. But Beatsaber just kind of is almost sort of designed for the technology, and it's just an amazing experience. And actually, funny enough, it was one of the things that was recommended to me very early on. It was recommended actually by one of the people at Facebook. But actually, that as a thing to sort of stick on a headset and just have a bit of a fun for sort of 15-20 minutes, it's really good. But also, as a social experience, it's one of those kind of immersive experiences that you can stick somebody else in the headset, you can see what they're doing on screen, and actually you get that sort of that communal experience, which I don't think you get from many other experiences. And I think sort of by extension, the Ocean Descent piece that Sony PSVR did as well is a great one to watch. It's interesting to kind of experience, but actually that's a great one to stick somebody else in a headset who doesn't know what's coming, and you can sit back with a cup of tea or a glass of wine and kind of chuckle at them as they react to the experience. But I think so that was 4, I think it was, in terms of the answer to your one question. But I think there's been some really interesting things.
Yeah, it was an unfair question to ask what your favourite was. I do agree. It's interesting that you used the word natural at some point there about the audience, because I think that when you were talking about Beatsaber, it does feel very natural to do it. The user experience is great. You're just slashing away and you don't feel the controllers are in your hand at all at the end. It just feels like your hands. So yeah, I think that's quite an interesting word to think about with this, with the whole immersive context. Tonya, how about you?
Yeah, so I'll say, if you hadn't said we live in an ocean of air, I would have said that. And I would just say the reason why is because of the technology around tracking your breath in virtual space and giving visibility to something that you do every day all the time, and understanding how those gases exchange with nature was really great, because when you stepped out of the virtual experience, you knew more about yourself and how it connects to the wider world, which I think a lot of people kind of think, VR is opposed to that. It's putting you in a different world, but actually that experience makes you know more about the physical world. So I like that. But I also would say that, I would also say Common Ground, which is a project that was prototyped through Creative XR, was a really great experience in terms of taking the genre of documentary filmmaking, I think, and pushing it forward, and kind of thinking about immersive as a way of social engagement. So, thinking about, a South London housing estate, what it's like to live in a housing estate, what those communities are, and how change over time affects those communities, was really, really interesting in terms of how do we connect with the wider world, how do we connect with other people? And it may be a way of drawing in new audiences to the immersive world that maybe wouldn't think it was for them.
I totally agree. I absolutely love that piece as well. And I think the bit where you get to spray paint in the, I would never do that in real life. And it was very interesting, it kind of made me feel uncomfortable, but it was a good feeling, because you feel, connected to that space somehow. Okay, so I'd like to ask the audience now the same question. So what do you think are the most ambitious and technically challenging immersive experience that you've done, and why? And I'd also like to ask the panel. So Tonya mentioned Oceans of Air, really kind of technologically ambitious experience. Matt, do you have any experiences that you thought were really, really great integrated use of technology?
I think it's a tricky one, because I think inherently these are sort of technology-led experiences, or they're content-led sort of technology-delivered experiences. So I think there are a number of those experiences that have been great. Actually, there was one, and I I can't remember the name, but actually that tells you that I remember more about the experience than the product, I guess. But it was one of the BAFTA winners recently. But I remember actually there was a piece where you put the headset on, and it was a very sort of cozy experience. I mean, the story was very, very dark actually, and you come at the end of it saying, I remember more the experience than I do the name. But the thing that I liked about it was actually when you looked up, there was a window in front of you, and you could see kind of a sort of slightly blurry reflection, and obviously it wasn't a reflection of you, but it was tracking your movement, and just that really small kind of piece of positive feedback just suddenly made you feel like you were kind of sitting in the room, and this was an experience that you were really deep into the middle of, and that was really good. But I think there have definitely been others. I think sometimes when you sort of the blending between some of the the headset experiences and haptics, when you can kind of combine those two, I think you get a compound effect that's really interesting. I mean, there's also some of the ones where the sort of the mixed reality bit. So there was one of the immersive cinema experiences at South by Southwest. It was a room-based VR backpack mounted with 4 of you, and 2 of you were in the sort of space center control mechanism. 2 of you were kind of going down to do the repairs. But actually there had to be communication between the teams. But the bits where you were sort of within a space station looking around, and you had to sort of reach forward and pull a lever, and you put your hand out and there was a physical lever there. Those blended experiences for me. Actually, one of the Audiences of the Future projects, actually Hyphen, which was Annette and Simon were talking about yesterday with Figment Productions. Again, they've got that sort of going around their demonstration piece where you kind of say and there's a bit where they did a sort of initial demo where you were kind of walking around and feeding dinosaurs. But there's sort of the interactions on the floor, so there was kind of different textures on the floor, and there were things that you opened and things that you pulled that were matching the VR experience. With that stuff, I think that's when it really takes it up to the point where you get that whole immersive experience. So that the blend of the physical with the digital, I think, is really, really interesting.
I totally agree. Tonya, how about you? What do you think has been a really kind of good use of technology and very ambitious that you've tried recently or before?
Yeah. I would say another marshmallow laser feast, which is Sweet Tooth, which tries, and again, I think it's about trying to engage all the senses, not just the visual, not just the audio, but lots of different senses, and not just ambition about a piece that is a virtual piece, but actually you taste things and smell things. Is really pushing the boundaries of what we mean by immersive. Now, the funny thing is, it kind of marries very new technology with very old school theater and prop making and people running around trying to give you this experience in the physical world while you're, navigating something in the virtual world. But I think that's kind of where we are right now, is we're really trying to engage all the senses. And right now that can't be done just through a screen. It has to involve other things. So I'm really interested in how that's going to evolve as a practice.
Blend's very interesting.
Sort of
sorry, Matt.
Taste, sorry, was one of the other projects we funded, which I don't think was successful in the end for various technical challenges, but was Ollie's Edible Adventures, and that was about kind of the sort of bringing taste in as part of that immersive experience. You say sort of taste and smell, I think, has not really been explored. We've seen a couple of projects that people have tried to deliver around that space, but not enough yet. I think that's going to be a very interesting area of development, I suspect.
I completely agree. Naki, how about you? What do you think's been really good technology-wise with immersive?
Yeah, first of all, I echo this, like encouraging producers to encourage, sort of explore multisensory solutions. But I would sort of salute any production that tries to combine a number of these technologies, whether it's like putting projection technologies in one room and putting a VR headset in a backpack in another room. And therefore, a more recent one was the War of the Worlds experience running in London, while for me personally it was somewhat uneven as an experience. I still admire the fact that these guys ran ... They ran that for however many months every day pretty much, and clearly some people were really into it, and it included projection domes, VRs, headsets and backpacks in a room scale setup, and hydraulics and props and all kinds of stuff. So this idea of how do you design these experiences? There's this term orchestrating, and I think that's really valid here, that it becomes much more than the experience itself. It becomes almost like part of service design, but I think the orchestrating as a word when there are creative aspirations in play is a fitting term, and sort of labels what these producers are trying to achieve.
I think that's really interesting. A couple of my favourites, I worked on a couple of projects when I was at Ignition, and one was for Nissan, and you lay down on a motion platform and you were strapped in and you had the Oculus Rift on your face, and the motion platform tipped ever so slightly and moved side to side, and there was a fan going as well. So the experience, you were flying and you had to collect things, and it was only a very tiny shift, but it really inspired, it made people scream and people, nearly be sick, and it was so impactful. And but just trying to link everything up together and make it consistent, and you wanted to show it to 150 people a day in a shopping centre, and everything got too hot and nothing was really built for that. It was all kind of put together with elastic bands. And to cast mine back a little bit further, the another installation that Ignition did, the Top Shop first, I think it was the world's first VR live stream. So there was a fashion show down at the Tate, and then there were some people in a pretend catwalk in the store in Oxford Street, and they put the headset on and they could see the catwalk being live streamed, so they could look down and see what was on people's phones. If they looked up, they could see the models having a cigarette break on the roof, and if they looked behind, they could see the models in the changing room. And there hasn't been lots of that live stream stuff really. There's been great stuff done by Melody VR, but not of these kind of live events. So I'd love to see more of that as technology and 5G hopefully. I want to look at the audience now. They have suggested some favourites of theirs. So Half-Life Alyx from Neil Jakeman. I was so immersed in it that I occasionally tried to kick objects in my way, and a section toward the end which felt like being in Inception. So I don't know whether you guys, I know Aki's tried Half-Life Alyx. I don't know whether you, Matt and Tonya have. Aki, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, in the gaming space, it's a bit of an outlier, to be honest, because it's a VR game without a budget, really, produced by Valve, who run Steam and have millions of dollars and time to put into this. So it's kind of like a outlier in the sense that most VR game studios don't have that luxury. But that said, yeah, I mean, in terms of execution, it is par excellence. It's just does things so well. And yes, I've also heard stories of people playing it in like empty parking lots, at the basement of their apartment house, and that seems to be the best, the most impressive way to get the experience out of it. But yeah, it is very impressive.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. And Caroline White, Where Thoughts Go by Lucas Risotto, an amazing capture of loads of people's most intimate feelings in a beautiful world. I don't know whether the panel has got any comments on that. I really like that piece.
Yeah, just to comment that I think what that piece of work does in an interesting way, it uses voice as an input, and I think that's definitely underexplored, because I also for me, the unique thing that VR does is the sense of presence that it enables. And at least on an anecdotal level, I have evidence that speaking aloud, expressing yourself when you are in VR, so it's such a embodied act as we do here. Our voice comes from somewhere in our body. And when you do that in a VR, in a completely fabricated environment, it really puts you, grounds you into that illusion, and therefore I encourage again creators to explore that space more.
The VR karaoke we did yesterday. I was just going to add something in terms of, sorry to interrupt, in terms of War of the Worlds piece. Actually, I think as you say, it was really interesting, and we took the kind of whole team there actually. But the interesting piece about it was, say, it was a bit mixed in sort of every sense. But actually, the interesting bit is that the kind of the immersive piece around the sort of physicality of it, and the kind of the actors taking you through, and some of the props. And I think there's a bit where you're on a boat and they're chucking kind of water in your face. But actually the technology elements can be sort of dropped out and replaced and upgraded over time. And actually that can exist within that framework of that sort of mixed reality experience with the actors and the props. actually the technology piece can only get better. So it'd be really interesting to see what they do sort of, you know, as a team and as an installation over time. Anything I would say in terms of that, one of the worst experiences I've had, and it was a research piece, I hasten to add, but this is with the Not in Reality, I think mixed reality labs they've got. They put me in a headset and they put me on a swing, and actually, so when you moved forward, it moved the camera view along the street. It was I would say, out of the many different experiences I've ever had, that one made me the illest, the fastest for the longest. It took about 30 seconds, and then it took me a long time to recover off that, because it was there was no correlation between the physical motion of the swing with the kind of movement within the environment, and it was just horrendous. But it was an interesting research piece, I'm sure. Lessons to be learned, what not to do, I suspect. But yeah, it was interesting. Exactly.
I think it's really interesting that you brought research pieces up there, because we'd love to encourage the community and the audience to submit research pieces, because, you know, there's such little visibility of those, and also those very small installations that only a few people may have seen before. You know, we want to kind of look for those hidden gems. We've got some more audience ideas. Star Wars Secrets of Empire by the Void had some great physical virtual interactions. Totally agree. And again, I think that having a bigger budget sometimes is very helpful to be able to play with new things and new toys. And then Steph Clark, the most immersive experience for me, which was actually pretty lo-fi technologically, but very ambitious logistically and volunteer staffing heavy, was Uni Bum Bum Train in Stratford or Charing Cross. Oh my God, this was one of my favorite things that I've ever done. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And I'm definitely more of a behind the camera sort of person, but being forced to kind of, you know, force immersion and complete surprise, because I didn't know what it was amazing. Don't know whether any of the other panelists have experienced Uni Bum Bum Train. No, I won't tell you any more about it, just in case you ever get to do it. So that can be a little Easter egg for you. So we've got Carne y Arena by Alejandro Inarritu, technically and emotionally very powerful. I did not get to see this experience, so I don't know whether any of you guys did. I have heard great things about it though, and again, it's a real shame that some of the experiences, you know, it's just that handful of people. Let's have a look. The Casimir in Liverpool, too many to mention, but Omphalos, a fictional visitor centre experience. That sounds very interesting. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. And then we've got Steph Clark again. I also really enjoy Greenpeace VR's project with the Feelies in the Amazon rainforest, Munduruku, which use heat and sense, which really added to the immersion in the narrative. Maybe I can ask, sorry, let me just get a bit of water.
So just while there's a gap, in terms of the 360 streaming and video, obviously we're doing a big component of that, or a big component of the Weaver demonstrator in terms of our esports demonstrator for Audience of the Future is that sort of 360 streaming video, so you can kind of be within the venues, you can see where the teams are, and actually we had a demo of that recently, and it was sort of historical footage for obvious COVID reasons, but actually going into a kind of live venue and being able to kind of look around and look down and sort of look over people's shoulders while you're within a big venue with all the kind of sort of crowd looking at you is again, it sort of definitely adds to the experience, I think.
I definitely agree. I did an early prototype of the solution, and I'd love to have another demo, so I'll have to catch up with the team. Yeah. It's interesting that Greenpeace was mentioned there, because I think the NGOs were quite forward-thinking in their use of 360 in particular, to get their message across and to really make people feel empathy. I don't know if the panelists want to talk about any of those kind of charity experiences that they might have done that they enjoyed.
Yeah, there was one at South by Southwest when they were still running South by Southwest, and there was it was part of the Immersive Theatre, and there was a group there, and it was about the wall. It was about sort of Trump's wall and the impact of the wall, and it was about the impact on sort of both communities and the ecosystem. What was interesting about it was I was sort of chatting to the guy and looking at the demo, and it looks kind of, it wasn't very high production value, shall we say, and I was looking at this and going, well, this is okay, this is interesting, but it looks a bit rough around the edges. And then while I was there, I was kind of chatting to him, and I did a sort of very quick to camera piece around sort of Audiences of the Future, and about 45 seconds later he kind of took that footage, dropped it into the environments, and suddenly me, I was there having been filmed just now in an immersive environment in front of this big.
I was gonna again mention common ground, especially like from a personal point of view. I coming from like an interactive and gaming background, I always felt that I used to feel that 360 is not the sort of optimal, or it's not, VR is not really meant for that. But I think what Common Ground does so well is blends those formats. It has both like real-time engine render footage, and then it has 360 stuff, and then obviously the topic is handled in such a poignant way, and I just think that the work not only captures an era very well with also with the music and stuff, and then it's just very human, as many of the best documentaries are. So 1+ for Common Ground.
It's also the We Wait VR piece, which is on the BBC at the moment, isn't it? I think, which is the sort of putting you in the middle of that refugee experience. It's an Aardman piece, I think. That's worth a look as well. Yeah,
that's a fantastic piece. Okay, so we've got some more ideas from the audience. I'll hopefully get back to those later, but I want to move on a little bit now to kind of the hardware and software advancements that have made the creation of these immersive experiences possible over the last 20 years. So things like graphics cards. I lived in Second Life for 7 years, and rendering was always a nightmare. You'd fly around and it would take such a long time for things to render, and nothing ever looked really realistic enough, and you had the kind of distance of the screen. But now graphics cards are getting better, it's getting much more realistic. Smartphones, now we can have fantastic AR experiences on a smartphone, and it doesn't even need to be that new anymore. And also headsets at home, you can get a brilliant Quest 2. Headsets are no longer only in labs for research. You can just buy one and it'll be there tomorrow with Amazon. I want to put a little poll out to the audience, and also to ask the panelists which tech development you think has been the most instrumental in accelerating the progress of immersive technology and content. So number 1 is the smartphone, number 2 is the Oculus Rift 1, and number 3 is the launch of real-time game engines such as Unity and Unreal. So I'll ask the audience that. I think the poll's going out in the chat, and for you guys, number 1, the smartphone, number 2, Oculus Rift, or number 3, the launch of real-time game engines. So Aki, I'll go to you first.
Well, my immediate thoughts when seeing this question would have been number 2, the Oculus Rift, but I'll actually choose number 3, because I think long-term software and creative uses of software will be key. And I'm a big believer that if we are to accelerate, for instance, the adoption of these technologies into various forms, it needs to come from sort of from the grassroots creator maker movement. And that's why it's sort of personally close to my heart to try to encourage people to get into making stuff. And there's really no excuses nowadays. YouTube is full of tutorials. Most of these tools are free. Obviously the headsets and stuff, that's the big issue in terms of accessibility. But you can do immersive stuff, as we've mentioned, with binaural audio and things. It's an umbrella term. So and in any case, you most likely use a piece of this software. So that's my choice.
Okay, Antonia, how about you?
Yeah, I'll have to agree with the third option, which is the real-time game engines, and this actually comes from just pure personal experience, because before I started working for Arts Council, I was running a very small Egyptian museum at University College of London. And we had a project grant that allowed us to bring a software developer in to help us use our 3D assets. And we used Unity as a game engine. And we would not have been able to prototype and test as rapidly and quickly different kinds of applications for the same 3D assets unless there were those game engines that are so user-friendly. And so allow smaller organizations, different types of organizations to really test and experiment with them. And so I think that's the real, and the fact that those game engines can render for different types of devices, I think is really, really helpful as well. So I would have to put my vote there.
Okay, great. And Matt?
Yeah, I was definitely trying to think how I could not vote the same way, but I think that is the right answer. I think, yeah, Unreal and Unity, I think the kind of the sort of the options for kind of, you know, content and delivery that those platforms enable are great. I mean, it's not that they're specifically developed for this purpose, but obviously they're of a time when actually you can now, you know, roll them out in the kind of right areas. And saying a lot of them are available for little or no cost, especially for kind of universities and students and research projects. One thing I would say in terms of that, the thing about prototyping is, I mean, those engines are there and they are available, and I would, you know, encourage people to use them. I think I've seen a number of projects where sort of people are trying to solve really interesting research problems, or they're trying to build interesting prototypes and develop this, and actually a significant proportion of their time, budget and effort goes to building their own game engine. And then what comes out of it at the end of it is sadly diminished, because what you're looking at looks, you know, it looks like the kind of worst kind of shareware, and you go, please don't spend your time building another game engine. Someone else has already done that. These tools are available. You know, concentrate on the tricky bits, concentrate on the experience, concentrate on the research problems. You know, I think clearly if your business plan is about building a platform for other people, then that's a different conversation. But I think, you know, if it's a research piece, if it's a kind of initial prototyping piece, I would encourage people not to waste the valuable time and resources that they've got in building yet another game engine. You don't need to. And I have seen some stuff that say has done really clever, interesting stuff, which has been let down a little bit just by the kind of the visuals. And you think, actually, if you could drop this into one of the existing game engines, it would be so much more impactful, it'd be so much more interesting, and you would still be able to do exactly what it is you wanted to do. And I think about in terms of Oculus Rift, in terms of the headsets, I think it was definitely of its moment. You know, there, as Aki said, you know, it's not necessarily about head-mounted displays. It's about the whole kind of immersive experience in the broader sense. And even though it's the future, we spend a lot of time explaining to people on the periphery of those kind of communities and that ecosystem that it isn't just AR and VR. You know, it's AR, VR, MR, XR, all the Rs, but also it's haptics, it's sonics, it's advanced visualizations, it's all of those kind of immersive experiences. Although, to be fair, there was one conversation I had in a briefing event a long time ago, was whether or not books were considered immersive tech, because books can be quite immersive, you know, not in this context, unfortunately. But yeah, I think that sort of the immersive technology in its broadest sense is where it gets kind of, you know, there are so many options there, and it isn't just about AR and VR. I think the next step change is when, you know, the form factors on the headsets become, you know, when you can do sort of augmented reality in a pair of glasses, and a proper pair of glasses, you know, not just sort of, you know, HoloLens thing. That'll be another kind of major step forward, but who knows when that is. But I do think it's about the software at this point in time.
I completely agree, and so does the audience. So we've got 54% real-time game engines, 38% smartphones, and 8% Oculus Rift. So no controversy there. And something that you said earlier, Matt, was really interesting, and someone in the audience has kind of echoed that. You used the word framework to kind of build these content experiences where you could swap bits of technology in and out. And someone has said, for me, already mentioned Sleep No More, which I experienced in New York 3 times, but I would love to carry that over into AR, combining theatre play in public spaces. So I think that idea of framework is really, really interesting, and something probably people will continue to explore, especially with episodic content, and if they want to create something with a budget that they can build onto later, that they don't have to completely creating from scratch all the time.
And also, I think hopefully that's one of the reasons why we're funding those big demonstrator projects, is they are demonstrators, and actually some proof of tech. So in terms of, you know, Jonathan speaking in terms of Factory 42 and the visitor experience, that sort of blended between the head-mounted augmented reality displays within a physical environment. So the, you know, the kind of CG actors are interacting with the physical environment. So your dinosaurs running along a shelf and knocking over a real book in a real environment. Those kind of blended experiences are quite good. But then being able to kind of swap in and out the content and sort of scale that experience, and then it becomes about, you know, the sort of throughput and the commercialization at scale of those experiences, rather than just, you know, sort of struggling with the technology all the time. Again, I think that will open many new options for people.
I completely agree. I was planning on playing some videos, but I'm really enjoying the conversation, and I'm not really sure if I'm going to get to show any. But we've got another question in the audience here from Andrew Chitty. Are there any well-known projects, experiences, or heavily promoted hardware advances that the panelists would like to consign to a sort of room 101 hell? Okay, so what do we want to kill? Which darling of the immersives do we want to get rid of? Any ideas?
I think I'd immediately chuck the Nottingham University VR swing in the bin, if I'm honest. But yeah, there's probably a better answer than that.
Okay, the VR swings in the bin. Sorry, Nottingham. Aki?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I do think we should chuck panels, user interface panels to an extent. Like what I'm saying is that I do think that as these technologies and pieces of content become more prevalent, they will find their own language in terms of how we interact with them, and we interact with them spatially. That's kind of like in the nature of these technologies, and certainly some conventions from these screen-based things that most of us are looking at right now will remain and are still feasible. But I kind of my sort of shoulders kind of go down every once in a while when I see a very sort of one-to-one solution brought into, for instance, VR in terms of how you choose like drop-down menus or something. Don't do that in VR. You can do better.
I completely agree. It's quite lazy UX, isn't it? And Tonya, how about you? What do you want to bin?
Well, I have to say, I probably just don't think that way. because I do think every piece of experimentation is really interesting and tells us what we don't want to do and what we do want to do. And so I tend not to think of things that way. I don't know. I wouldn't say I have one thing that would totally be binned.
I think that was a very, very good question. And I think for me, one of the things that I'd really like to bin and stop people doing is representing women in a highly sexualized fashion in VR, because I was, in VR chat, for instance, trying to find an avatar that isn't an animal or that looks like some kind of sex robot is practically impossible. And you have to build on yourself. Why can't you just have normal looking avatars? Because I just kind of want to look like myself. So yeah, that's my pet gripe, and it was in the Second Life days as well. So just normal avatars. Okay, so
I think about in terms of the design piece around immersive is interesting as well. I think because sort of it's almost like the beginning of the days around sort of ebooks and things where people were spending a significant amount of effort and sort of doing these sort of lovely graphical representations of animated pages turning, and you go, but actually that's not adding anything. I mean, it's sort of adding to the experience, but actually you don't need to replicate every aspect of the physical. You need to kind of talk, you almost kind of have to take a step back and go, okay, what's the point of the information flow here, and how's the best way to implement this within a completely new environment? And I think Aki's right in terms of immersive experiences. It isn't just about kind of, we're so used to using kind of, a mouse and a menu and a drop down, and we're just going to virtualize all that. Well, maybe that's not the right answer. Maybe there's another way of doing that. And I guess as things like kind of hand tracking and body tracking and eye tracking get better, I guess the options for interfaces open up, and it isn't just going to be about replicating that physical experience necessarily. But yeah.
Actually, I have one more slightly more provocative. Let's bin smartphone AR. Okay, there I said it. Let's get the glasses on. About time.
Okay, wow, that's a pretty bold statement, Aki. I don't know if you'll get anyone that works with smartphone AR turn up to your panel later, but let's see, you might do. He can maybe expand on that another time. Okay, so the kind of final little section that I wanted to talk about was a lot of immersive experiences are very, very visceral and emotional and elicit extreme responses in people. I've seen people go into immersive experiences and come out crying, feeling enraged, feeling elated, joyful. I want to ask the panelists and also the audience, what is the most kind of visceral experience that you've ever done? I had a fantastic experience. Well, I'd say fantastic. It was quite very emotional and rather disturbing. Samantha Kingston made a brilliant 360 film about being the child of an alcoholic, and I watched it at Digital Catapult in the lab with several of our colleagues. And after I took the headset off, several people were crying, they were very emotional, and then I had a very personal interchange with one of my colleagues that I didn't know very well, and I don't think I ever would have done that from watching a flat screen video at all. So I feel like that really kind of opened the door for us to have that interchange. So let's go to Tonya first. What's been the kind of most emotional experience that you've had in an immersive context?
Yeah, I saw, this is again a 360 video, but it was called 4 Feet Blind Date. And it was the experience of an 18-year-old woman who's wheelchair bound, who's endeavoring to start dating, like the rest of her people in her age group, but and also having to deal with online dating, and when to share her state of disability and that type of thing. And I just thought it was, I mean, in essence, it was a story that we don't see in any kind of platform, television. So it was a story that is a story that we don't hear very often. But then I think what the filmmakers did, and I think it comes out of Argentina actually, is figure out exactly how immersive can help tell that story better. So I think almost when you have brand new stories and you meet it with new technology, that's, you get that spark there where you're not doing, you're not trying to replicate an experience someplace else in immersive, but actually you're using it. You got a new story and a new medium, and you're bringing that together. And for me, that really just hit home. I think about it often, that challenge of what it'd be like to be young, disabled, and trying to date, so these are issues that we think about all the time, but from a particular perspective.
Thank you. Aki, how about you? What really kind of, got you going, either really upset you or really elated you?
Well, what really elated me and the one experience, one of the few experiences I actually go back time and time again in VR it's more like a gaming experience, but anyhow is from Res Infinite, which is used to be a game 15 years ago for the consoles, but they made a VR version, and they made Area X, which is a specific level for VR. And it's this very super sort of synesthetic experience where it's kind of like a shooter game, but not really. It's kind of like a rhythm game and shooter game. And it's just like, it speaks to me. It has electronic dance music and stuff like that, and a very specific aesthetic. But I remember experiencing that for the first time. I remember thinking at the back of my mind that this is like, among the top 5 live gigs that I've experienced in my life. And here I am in my attic in a headset. And yeah, and it's also very convenient. I have the luxury of having a headset, and that game, I can go back to it whenever I feel like it. So yeah, that's my choice.
Excellent. I love that you like, and it's got dance music in there. Cool. How about you, Matt? What has really kind of touched you?
I'm not sure really. I think sort of quite a wide variety of things. I think there's sort of, it's the things that I guess, and I really wish I could remember the name of the piece in the say that was the BAFTA thing, but it was and I think it's because that as an experience, because you sort of remember the experience of it, but it's more of a kind of collective thing, I would say, rather than any one experience or any one product. It's the fact that you sort of, you can put your headset on and this is going to sound very obvious, I guess, but then you're completely immersed in those environments, and you can kind of tune everything out. And actually the fact that then they sort of, it's almost kind of, you end up they becoming part of you, have a memory of that experience, and actually, yeah, that's quite a powerful thing. And you can sort of drop in and out of different things and different environments and different experiences. I don't think there's been particularly a sort of I don't think they've quite nailed the social elements yet, although we'd say we did as part of the kind of Creative China piece, we did the VR karaoke last night. And I was chatting to Andrew about it earlier on. I think the fact that we haven't been able to see these people in person for about, for a year. We went to China last year, and actually lockdown and everything else has happened. The fact that you can kind of drop into those rooms, the challenges around the avatars notwithstanding, but the fact that you're there and you can chat to people and the voices are coming from the right place, it's just really simple, but really quite powerful. And actually, you feel like you've spent an evening with friends, and you've met up with people again, and all you've done is you've sat at your desk, or you've sat, with your headset on. But actually, that sort of social connection you can enable remotely. So I think it'll only get better. But I think that's the sort of experience that I think that stays with you and is really interesting about this kind of technology.
Completely agree. And as part of our social for the Creative XR showcase, we had Deborah Francis White from the Guilty Feminist come and give us a comedy show, which was great because then the cohort and the guests from all around the world could come. And it was great because I'm a big fangirl of Kent Bye, and I got to sit next to him at the comedy show. So that was really great. I was kind of half, elated to see Deborah and then half scared that I was sitting next to Kent Bye. But we had a brilliant cocktail party moment where we were outside and I kind of went, oh, and that's Peter Collis, who I make 360 films with, and Kent was like, and Peter said, oh, I heard my name mentioned, and his avatar toddles along, and I thought, oh, it was so nice to have that little experience, because again, many of us have, well, none of us have had that for many months. Just looking to the audience here, Rob Vincent says, oh yes, the Blind Date film was extraordinary, completely put you inside the story alongside the characters. And Samantha Kingston says, The Tempest. Tenderclaw was my favourite lockdown cultural experience, truly immersive and transporting. I did not have a chance to try that. I don't know whether any of the panelists did. Tempest by Tenderclaw.
I did, yes. Yeah, it's a unique experience. Personally, I actually prefer the virtual reality from Tenderclaws, but that's a very different animal. But I totally get that people are over the moon with The Tempest.
Yes, it was really, really interesting. I listened into the talk the other day and Samantha was talking about using hecklers to change audience energy in experiences. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting, but really, really scary at the same time. And then Steph Clark says, I tried Res Infinite in Tokyo, and when it was still being tested, the haptics were so intense. I felt like I was on a roller coaster and had to sit down for 20 minutes afterwards. Oh, well, I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for you, Steph. But we've got about 2 minutes left. So I'd just like to wrap up. First of all, thank you very, very much to the panel. You've been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas and your thoughts about content. Thank you so much to the audience for taking time to tune in and also to share your ideas. And also do visit the Immersive Arcade. We'll post the URL in the chat and in the main chat as well, so everybody can have a look, and also to submit your ideas. So how the process will work, you'll submit your ideas and then the ideas will come into our brilliant curatorial panel. 3 of them are here right now and 3 of them couldn't make it. So the other people are Becky Gregory Clark from Story Futures Academy, Maria from Rain Dance, and Nick Rook from Sony. So they will discuss and debate, and then the kind of winning entries will get through onto the timeline. And then that's a precursor to something else that will be coming next year, the immersive showcase element that will be a virtual reality way to experience some of this content. But ... I'll leave you with that teaser, and we'll tell you more about that later on. So yeah, thank you so much. I don't know if there's any final reflections from the panel. We've got a minute left. Matt, would you like to make some final comments?
Just a quick comment, I think, and it's kind of a quick plug really, just to remind everyone about I'm really looking forward to actually is the current Rising project at the Royal Opera House, that kind of hyper reality opera piece that you can book tickets for imminently, but also the rest of the demonstrated projects. I mean, the stuff that's coming out from kind of RSC as part of that project is going to be really good, and we can't talk about it just yet, but I think in terms of those sort of large scale demonstrations, in fact they're all great, I mean the Dinosaurs and Robots piece, and the esports is very its own beast, and also the moving image bit in terms of the fact that the story is part of the innovation, and it's it's Aardman canon, and it follows on from Matter of Life and Death. But I mean, I know it was a shameless plug for the program, but actually those demonstrated projects which are coming are looking really, really good. So I just please do keep an eye out for those and try and grab them as soon as you can, because they are going to be really good, I think.
Completely agree. Very excited. Go ahead, Tonya.
Yeah, just quickly to say that I think what we've seen in the Creative XR cohort this year through COVID is people really thinking really in an interesting way about how to have home-based experiences as opposed to location-based experiences, and lots around pop-up stages and pop-up books that kind of provide a really interesting experience at home in order to have that kind of, interesting immersive experiences without having to go out.
Completely agree. That physical and virtual, again, really interesting mix. Aki, any final reflections?
No, just about those pivots from location-based to home to 15 session spaces. Come and listen.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for listening.